Hello and welcome back to Interjections. We've got a two-man edition today. Myself and Jay holding down the fort. Miko is probably drinking and Irfan is allegedly sick. Jay, what's going on?
The older I get, I can't handle these high processed foods like Doritos and stuff anymore. Now I'm eating baked sea salt and rosemary whole grain chips. And the fucked up thing is they're actually delicious. So, if you ever needed a sign that you're getting old as fuck, there it is. But I'm doing pretty well. I think we lack nothing today. I think the two pillars are here to shoulder the burden of maintaining this entertainment juggernaut franchise known as Interjections.
I'll say that the telltale sign you're getting old is when you find sparkling water a good beverage choice. When I was 20, 25, the idea of, a bubbly, a LaCroix were just revolting, disgusting. Give me the hard stuff, give me a soda, give me something. But as you get older and it slowly becomes an acceptable drink option, that's how you know you're approaching middle age rapidly.
Drinking soda water literally as we speak. I drink soda water probably every day.
That's all the proof you need.
I don't know what seltzer water is. That's some American thing.
When you say you're drinking soda water right now, like what is that to you?
Just carbonated water, sparkling water.
Yeah, okay. We're speaking the same language. I think seltzer usually just means there's alcohol involved.
What? There's alcohol in seltzer water. Isn't seltzer those like little tablets that you can put in shit?
I don't know. When I hear a seltzer, I think of like a hard seltzer.
Right. What's that like? Soda water and some kind of spirit?
Yeah, basically.
Fair enough.
So I want to start this week by talking about what transpired midweek when we were up, feet kicked back, watching the Champions League, because we were all watching, bated breath, trying to figure out who our next opponent was going to be. And there was a distinct possibility we were going to draw Milan or Juve in the next rounds. It pretty much a 50-50 proposition if either of them went through. And after the first round of their performances, we thought they were both going to go through. I want to say Juve had the lead and Milan were down, but still you thought they'd eventually get the job done. And then, of course, they both go crashing out in just phenomenal styles. Juve just dominated by Perisic for the second consecutive game. Milan was definitely the funnier of the two losses when you have Teo Hernandez getting a red card for simulation and then a smash and grab goal from Feyenoord, and Milan never recovers from it. So if you were worried about having another derby this year, if you thought we were going to have another derby loss this year, that's what the Coppa Italia is for. But in the Champions League, we've avoided that fate. And if you're going by quality of opponents, we have probably lucked out in that regard. We've taken an opponent who isn't a traditionally big side. We've taken an opponent who, don't have history with us the way Milan and Juve do. I've seen some Inter fans already mapping out our path to the semifinal. We're going to play Barca in the semifinal. They see the route through. You're absolutely out of your mind if you're taking Feyenoord for granted when you consider all we have going against us, including our lackluster performances in the Champions League so far this season, the fact that this is a very difficult away venue in Rotterdam. Milan showed you that firsthand. It's not an easy place to go and win. So despite how poor Milan looked against them, and they looked against Milan, I'm not willing to write them off. It's, like I said, it's the favorable matchup. It's who you wanted on paper. But this team hasn't advanced to the round of 16 in the Champions League since when? 2011? So you can't take it for granted, but I do acknowledge, this is the most fortunate of opponents you could have drawn in terms of matchup. Like, there was a point in the Milan game where Feyenoord looked offside, and I needed an education. I had to be reminded that you cannot be offside in your own half because that's how pegged back Feyenoord were. It was that kind of game. having watched both them and the Juve match, PSV looked like the much stronger side. So, a couple things here, Jay. One is, which of the two Italian teams crashing and burning out of the competition did you enjoy more? For me, it actually was the Milan side, just because of the way in which they crashed out with the self-inflicted red card, the diving, the horrible performance. So, which crash out did you enjoy more, and what do you think of the draw we managed to secure for the next round of the Champions League?
It's a good question. I think a bit of a cop-out answer, but I enjoyed both eliminations equally. On one hand, as you mentioned, the highlight of the PSV result was, well, a former Inter player, of course, my opinion, a modern-day legend in Perisic coming back to haunt a favorite former victim of his, and he looked just, he showed his class. He really showed that despite his age, he's still got that pedigree of scoring big goals in big games, and not just, running onto a far post cross or tapping it in after making a smart run. I mean, like clutch goals that actually require a really high level of technical proficiency and poise to execute. And so for Perisic to do that, not only one, but both games against Juventus was just fantastic. I was happy for him as an individual, as well as just, the obvious benefits of him scoring as a former Interista against Juventus. But what was equally satisfying about the PSV result was just how badly PSV dominated them. It wasn't even close. Like PSV, especially in the second leg, outplayed Juventus to a humiliating degree. I felt Juventus were dominated. When you look at the amount of chances that PSV carved out, that game could have, arguably should have finished something like 5-1 to PSV. That's how much better they were than Juventus. And that's the number of kind of clear-cut, high-quality chances that PSV were able to create against this Juventus, who just looked like they had no answers to PSV. Having said that, you're right. It's obviously great to see. It was also highly enjoyable watching Milan capitulate against Feyenoord. They signed Feyenoord's star player and on-fire goal scorer in Santiago Jimenez in the January transfer window. Feyenoord were also going through some insane injury crisis. I think they had like 10 first-team players unavailable for that game. On top of that, they had been going through a period of poor form and had sacked their coach. So this was their caretaker coach's first game in charge of the first team. And and the result was very favorable, obviously, for us. And as you said, it felt like a bit of more of a bottle job for Milan, because I think they scored in like the first 30 seconds of the game, and it was Santi Jimenez of all players celebrating his new home by scoring against his former club within a minute. And as you said, Milan had it in their hands, only to throw it away and really kind of snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It was very, very Inter-esque in some ways. And so to see, our rivals be on the receiving end of that for once was very nice. Having said that, both games, as enjoyable as they were, a little bit of annoyance in that it kind of pointed out to me, look, how bad are these guys that they're getting on one of them is getting demolished by PSV of all clubs, and the other is capitulating at home against the Feyenoord, who were fifth in the Eredivisie, and going through a coaching and injury crisis. How bad must Milan and Juve be? But then how bad must we be to fail to win a single game against these guys, despite getting 5 chances at it? So a little bit of frustration there, but obviously all in all a good week.
You have to remind yourself that transitive properties do not apply in football, and no matter how much Juve gets dominated by PSV, that doesn't change the fact that they have this significant mental advantage over us every time we step on the pitch against them, which is why in the long run we are performing better than Juve on all fronts. But every time we play them, they bend us over and take us as their victim, because we simply cannot overcome that mental edge they have against us. But yeah, I mean, it's watching Perisic dominate as much as he did against Juve was refreshing. I've always been a huge Perisic fan. When he was finishing up his second spell at Inter, I was not someone who wanted to see him go. I wanted us to try and renew him. I know there was issues where I think we had won the Coppa, and after the Coppa, he was calling out Morata in the locker room saying, "This isn't how you treat star players. This isn't how you treat people," because our contract negotiation with him wasn't quite going right. But I maintain his second season, his second stint with the club, the second half of that season where he was playing as a left wing back is as high level of a performance as I've seen from an Inter player at that position. It was Maicon-esque, the quality of fullback he was playing at the end of that season. He was just on form every game, on fire, scoring great goals, creating chances, and it felt like that stint at Bayern had did him really well. So he obviously went to Spurs afterwards, struggled, but I really enjoyed watching him dominate Juve, seeing the Juve fans' online reaction of, oh, of course it's Perisic. If memory serves correct, Perisic has a pretty good goal scoring and assist track record against Juve, even if we didn't necessarily always win those games he was playing in. So that was definitely a satisfying part of the weekend, or midweek rather. And then as we're talking about the weekends, just more great results come filtering through. Milan yesterday, obviously, with the epic own goal leading to a loss in Torino. I think Milan have dropped three straight matches three straight matches against Torino in Turin. It's been a sequence of like three consecutive defeats, including their Ricardo Rodriguez screamer a couple seasons ago. So for whatever reason, Milan just cannot beat Torino. And then as we're sitting here talking, there is about 1 minute left in the Como-Napoli game, and Como was up 2-1 over Napoli. So everything's turning up Inter this week from a matches results. We'll get into the Serie A stuff, but I do want to get your opinion real quick, Jay, on what do you think of drawing Feyenoord? I think I mentioned Van Persie is being appointed manager, so they're going to be a new look squad by the time we face them in a couple weeks. But yeah, it's a team, I don't want to say in crisis, but at least in transition, where sold Jimenez in the transfer window. It really was a patchwork side that defeated Milan. You'd have to like our chances against them, right?
Definitely Feyenoord is preferable to us. Not to take anything away from Feyenoord, but they didn't humiliate Juve the way that PSV did. So when you look at the performances that the two sides put out, PSV were definitely the scarier team. So, and then, yeah, there's Perisic as well. So I wouldn't want Perisic to eliminate us after eliminating Juve. That would be painful.
And just to paint the picture for people, so obviously Feyenoord here in the next round, it looks like we'd be getting one of the German clubs, either Bayern or Leverkusen. And then in the semifinal, you're looking at Barcelona realistically. So this is the expectation right now is make it to the quarterfinal. And then from there, we can reassess. But you need to get to the quarterfinal now. You're the favorite to get to the quarterfinal, and all the pedigree and money that comes with it. This is the new bar we need to clear, and it should be an achievable goal. Let's talk about what happened in the match against Genoa yesterday, because this was one of the worst matches of the season from an aesthetic standpoint. The first half in particular was hilariously bad. It was just, this game was close to 90 minutes of nothing. Nothing performances, nothing chances. They were trying to show halftime highlights of this match on the Paramount Plus broadcast, and they had nothing to show. The best they had was Pavar's blocked shot that he took from outside the box that went out for a corner. It didn't even touch their keeper's hands. It was just a nothing first half where both teams looked lifeless. Genoa were content to sit back and just absorb pressure, and we weren't applying any pressure. And the entire half, as Mkhitaryan and Asllani struggled to control the midfield, I was just thinking to myself, about Mkhitaryan's quote from last week of these bastards are still feeling complacent. They still refuse to turn this thing up a notch. They're not turning the screw. They're just content to pass the ball around and assume they're going to pull a goal out of somewhere. And let's be honest, it's lucky we did pull a goal out of somewhere, because if not for what was essentially an own goal, we were not scoring yesterday. It was heartless. It was without any creativity. It was just an overall horrible performance. But, and this is the problem, and this is, the arguments I get into with people, that you either say it's champions DNA and, hey, good job, you got the 3 points, you managed to get the job done, you did the business against a, difficult to break down side, or it's you judge the match by what it looks like on the pitch, which is horrible quality, uninspiring play that makes you wonder how this team is possibly going to play 12 more matches this season and come away a Scudetto winner. The real issue with the team yesterday, though, as I mentioned, was the midfield. Mkhitaryan and Asllani were both incredibly poor. Mkhitaryan in particular was just off. He did the one thing he does well, which was he had a couple instances where he was able to pick up the ball and attack the Genoa defense, but he was out of ideas. He didn't know what to do with it once he got into the dangerous positions. A couple poor passes. He did set up DeMarco once, but DeMarco, frankly, is out of form right now. I don't know if it's that whatever illness he had. I don't know if he's also just stuck in this lethargic gear, but he was not good yesterday. Did not create any chances for us. And really, it all was on the shoulders of Barella yesterday. Barella was the only person who had some vigor to him. Barella was the only person who was playing with any urgency whatsoever. He tried to create something out of nothing. He had the fantastic shot off the post, and he was clearly the man of the match for me, and the only one who really cared, it felt like. What did you think of the match yesterday? I mean, honestly, Jay, that was one of the worst football matches I've ever watched in my life for the first 60 minutes or so. That had to be like a 0.1 to 0.1 XG type football match. It was awful.
I think when we went into the half, we had 6 shots, 0 on target against their 3 shots, 0 on target. So it was not the best advertisement for Italian football. I'm actually going to interject with a wild take here. Ironically, it happens to come when on an auspicious day when the greatest and potentially only fan of this footballer happened to pull out at the last minute due to a so-called illness. You can't see me, but I just did that with air quotes. I actually thought this was Asllani's best game in an Inter shirt to date. Now, I'm not just talking shit. I'm not trying to be funny or controversial. I genuinely liked what I saw from Asllani today. And it had all to do with his positioning. I felt this was the game where he showed the most intelligence in his positioning. I felt he was deeper in the midfield. I felt he dropped back to help the goalkeeper out a lot. His recycling of possession was a lot more refined. Today, I felt he was a lot more efficient. He was moving the ball faster, kind of upping the tempo and lowering it where needed. Like I said, dropping deep to do what Hakan and Barella do so much better than him, which is essentially replacing the back line and then allowing our centre-backs to move up the pitch and get involved in build-up play the way Pavard and Bastoni in particular excel at. That depends on the midfielders to drop deep and allow the centre-backs to make those attacking runs, right? Asllani was doing that yesterday. On top of that, he had 1 or 2 good balls over the top. Admittedly, in the second half, I felt there were a few shaky moments in defence, but especially based in the first half, I actually thought Asllani was good, like legitimately good for the first time that I feel quite satisfied with what he put out on the pitch. And as for Mkhitaryan, you're right in saying that there was a lack of end product. You know, he was driving the ball forward, making those connective runs from the halfway circle to just outside the opponent's box, and that's something that he really excels at. Despite being 36 years old, he's quite pacey still. However, the layups were often poor. His final ball was poor. And even when he got his final ball right, which was usually just a simple layup to DeMarco, you nailed it, man. DeMarco has been shit for a good month or two now. I don't know if it's got to do with his injury or his horrendous male pattern baldness, but DiMarco is just not having a good time these days. So yeah, that left flank was not as productive as we normally expect it to be, and especially when he really struggled yesterday. So it was a surprise not to see Zalewski, to be honest. With Carlos also injured, I was kind of begging for Inzaghi to put Zalewski on, but for whatever reason, he decided not to. I guess at the end of the day, we can't complain too much because we got the result, and I think he ended up with Darmian playing left wing back. Oh, was it Darmian? I can't even remember, man. But
Yeah, it was Darmian, who I'm guessing you wanted for the defensive solidarity.
yeah, of course. But I felt Genoa actually had some very, very dangerous chances. There was this one chance in particular where someone from the right flank snuck in a low cross that managed to get through all the way to the far post, but the Genoa player kind of slipped at the crucial moment and only managed to weakly poke the ball towards Martinez. So that was legitimately dangerous chance. Speaking of our 15 million euro reserve keeper, I thought his passing was pretty good. And you can see by just the way he's spraying it around that he's obviously quite confident in using his feet, maybe a bit more adventurous than Sommer. And I think he has potential to be more adventurous and more enterprising than Sommer with his feet once he, or if he ever gets entrusted as the first choice goalkeeper. Right now, I'm sure, especially against his former side, especially at a critical point in the season, his focus is more on just keeping things simple and not fucking up rather than, this is my chance to do my best Onana impression, I felt he kept it neat and tidy. But what I was saying was, you can tell by the way he kicks the ball, he's got a really powerful foot on him. Not much backlift, but there's some power in those legs for Martinez, and that's, I think, a good thing. It helps us play our more expansive game, passing out the back. So overall, not that he had anything to do from a defensive standpoint, but a positive league debut for him. And speaking of the other Martinez, ironically, that header, I think it was more or less goalkeeper bound, but happened to hit a Genoa defender and bounce into the corner of the net where it was unsavable. So bit of luck there, but it was a game where I think we saw the best and worst of Lautaro at the same time in some ways. On one hand, he came up clutch with the goal, even if it was kind of scuffed, even if it wasn't the most convincing finish. On the other hand, though, we had a moment where it was after his goal, so I think it was around the 75th to 80th minute, where he had some great sombrero down the right flank, picked up the ball near our halfway mark and just drove forward to the goalkeeper and then, failed to score. It takes I've been saying this forever, but it takes a elite finish to beat a keeper from a tight angle. There's only two options. You either squeeze it in at the near post high, right next to the goalkeeper's head, or you drive it in between his legs. But Lautaro, in kind of classical fashion, just shot dead center of mass, as they train those US policemen to do. And yeah, it was just such a shame that he couldn't turn that great move into a highlight reel finish. And like I said, that kind of encapsulated a lot of the good and bad that we see from Lautaro. But, he deserves credit for his involvement in the game. Lautaro was dropping deep, receiving the ball, holding off his man and then laying it off to the overlapping midfielder or to Dumfries. Dumfries' game was mental, by the way. It was just constantly just charging forward, barging people over, getting fouled and committing fouls. It's a pretty funny performance. Not a great performance, but it would have been funny had I been more amused by the state of the game at that point.
My problem with Aslani's performances is primarily his role when he's distributing the ball in the midfield. We all know he can hit the occasional pretty long pass, but even yesterday he was struggling to find the right person in the short and intermediate passes. He had 9 missed passes all match, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there were 2 specific instances where he's gifting Genoa goal scoring chances because of his poor passing. And the one in particular I'm thinking of, had to be bailed out by a Cherby. He had a poor mishit, went directly to the Genoa player, and if not for an excellent play by a Cherby, Genoa was going to be through on goal. So I'm not going to say he was the worst player on the pitch yesterday. I'm saving that for Mkhitaryan, but I'm still, when I list what I value most in the regista position, it needs to be that ability to cycle possession safely, relieve pressure. And he didn't do a good enough job yesterday of that for me. But on Lautaro, I thought he played as well as we could have hoped yesterday, considering the circumstances. You can't understate how difficult it is to play as a striker in a partnership when your partner is basically a dead person. And I know we've, as an Inter community, have sort of convinced ourselves that Correa is this like mercurial talent who is just always injured. But yesterday was a good reminder that no, not only is he's always injured, but he's also not good because he doesn't have drive. He doesn't have instinct or positioning. Yesterday was classic Joaquim Correa. This is the player we signed. He walks around the pitch without breaking a sweat. He doesn't make himself available. And when he gets in the ball, he takes way too long because he thinks he's going to dribble through 3 defenders, ends up losing it, and then stands there and watches as the opponent counters you. That was Correa yesterday. And then, of course, we get to see all sides of Correa when he gets injured, tries to sub himself off, and Inzaghi says, no, shut up, you're staying on the pitch. I'm not burning a substitution block on you. You can survive another minutes. But my point being is I give Lautaro a ton of sympathy because this is what he was playing with yesterday. He had Correa in the first half and Taremi in the second half. And Taremi's kind of growing into his role lately. Like there have been actual instances where he has possessed the ball in the opponent's box. But I remember one moment yesterday, he possessed the ball in the box and he immediately dribbled the ball out of the box. He like had his back to the goal. He received the ball in the box. He didn't know what to do. So he takes 4 dribbles outside the box, dangerous attacking position, gone. Taremi keeps trying these outrageous overhead kicks. And then I know you talked about Lautaro's fast break with the keeper where he had a one-on-one and he didn't have the technical ability to beat the keeper. But there was another break we had with Taremi and Lautaro. I want to say it was a 3-on-1 breakaway, and the spacing
That was
of
a
the breakaway.
disgrace. That was an absolute disgrace. If it's the one I'm thinking of, where
It is. It was horrible. You have a
it was
3-on-1 and
comical.
no one knows where to go.
It was comical. It was an absolute fucking clown show. As he said, it was like a 3-on-1 or 2-on-0 kind of break, and I think it was the one where Darmian had the ball, and then he chopped inwards or cut inwards from the left, so he was on his right foot. He could have shot. Instead, he kind of laid it off to his right to Lautaro. I don't even remember what happened after that. Lautaro, instead of shooting first time, took another touch and then tried to cut inwards, shoot on his left. Shot was blocked. Bit of a scramble. Ball came back to us, I think via Zielinski. Tried to play it through for Lautaro, who was offside, and inadvertently squared it to Taremi, who was unable to get a shot off or something. Oh man, I can't remember in detail, but it was just a blaze of just incompetence, just poor choice after poor choice.
And this is what our attack is without Thuram when we have these breakaway opportunities. And that's why I'm sympathetic to Lautaro's cause yesterday. He was, like you said, trying to get himself involved. He ultimately got us the goal. So not a negative thing to say. I mean, we know what he is from a technical standpoint, but he did what he had to do. And at the end of the day, it was just a get out with the 3 points, which he managed to accomplish. It's funny, your analysis of Martinez, the keeper, and that everything you were complimentary of has nothing to do with shot stopping, which speaks positively to the lack of chances we gave up yesterday. He wasn't really put in a situation where he had to bail us out the way Summers had to at times this season. But this guy just remains a complete unknown in terms of what we have as a goalkeeper. I did like his passing. There were a couple instances where he was playing a little bit higher off his line and he was able to intervene when the ball went back to him to peter out what could have been a couple dangerous general opportunities. So, on the scale of Radu stepping in as your reserve keeper against Bologna and, a critical match day to, Padelli bobbling the ball, giving up a rebound, then giving up a goal Like, of all the backup keeper performances I've seen over the years, like, this was a reasonably good one. There are no moments where I was shaking my head wondering what he was doing. So with Summer out for another 2-3 weeks, we're really going to have a chance to see, okay, would we spend 14 million on this guy for? What do we have? Is this someone who can replace Summer moving forward? And honestly, it's kind of a blessing in that regard, just because much like Inzaghi being forced to use Bissek at times last season, like now Inzaghi's being forced to play Martinez, and we're going to figure out what we have. And it's going to be real clear to us by the end of these 3 or 4 weeks whether or not we have a Serie A level keeper or not.
Yeah, absolutely. But don't you think that in itself is a kind of fucked up situation that we interestingly repeatedly find ourselves in when it comes to second keepers, where I feel like other clubs tend to use their second keepers a lot more than we
Yes.
ever do, with the exception of that Handanovic and Onana handover season. Generally speaking, we've been seemingly really unwilling to use our second keepers, even in less important early stage Coppa matches, Super Coppa matches, and things like this. And, you know, at the end of the day, of all the things you can worry about in a football club, it's one of the lower priority things, no doubt. But I still think it's important that your second keeper is ready to come in and do a job when called upon. The nature of the role is that it's unpredictable and that you generally play because something has happened to the first choice keeper. You are, by definition, a backup. For us not to kind of test the backups, it's kind of like not doing fire drills or something, or not making sure your emergency backup power generator actually works. That's what it kind of feels like. And so we learned that the hardest way with the infamous Radu game against Bologna. Yeah, hopefully we'll have no more of those instances. Having said that, I do recall Aldero playing it randomly in like the Champions League and stuff last season. Did he not play against Benfica? And we went like 3-0 down in the first half. João Mario hat-trick.
Yep, that's exactly when he played.
Yeah, exactly. So random time.
There's precedent. Like, there were better ways to do this. Like, I think of I want to say last year at Juve and like Szczesny's last season. Like, they were doing a great job rotating him in and out, only playing him for 3 matches, then giving their younger keeper a run out. Like, there are better ways to do this, but we just know how Inzaghi is, which is he's going to rely on his Mkhitaryan's, he's going to rely on his Summers until he's absolutely forced not to do it. And it's the trade-off, right? You're theoretically getting short-term results for the sake of lack of long-term developments. That's what you think you're accomplishing. But if you aren't, I don't want to rehash the Martinez transfer saga again, but if you spend 14 million on a keeper who Inzaghi can't trust in Serie A, you've got all sorts of problems. So it's been a poor job throughout the season by Inzaghi keeping the guy involved. But at least now we're going to find out what we have with him, because he's going to be playing in this critical Napoli game next weekend. He was probably going to play in the Coppa Italia against Lazio regardless. And this is kind of it, right? We've seen it. If he is a howler against Napoli, that's going to be enough to sink his entire Inter career, as terrible as it is to say. Whereas if he puts on a good performance, this is a guy you can go into next season, maybe anoint him your starter. Like, there's a pretty large scale of outcomes that could come from these couple of weeks with Martinez between the pipes.
Agreed.
So on that note, Lazio midweek for the Coppa Italia, could not care less about this at this point of the season. We're still competing on the 2 most important fronts, which are the Champions League, and we're competing very much for Scudetto still, which makes the proposition of having to play 2 Milan derbies in a semi-final of a Coppa Italia just straight up unappealing. And part of the problem is the expectations. Like, your Inter, if you make it to a semi-final of a Coppa Italia against Milan, there's going to be pressure to roll out your best side. Inzaghi's not going to feel like he can rotate, keep it easy, give Zalewski a run out, and he's going to feel compelled to go for it. And that's why I could not care less if we lose to Lazio. If anything, I might have a slight preference that we lose to Lazio and just rip the Band-Aid off. But the good thing is, when we played in the Coppa Italia, what was it, against Empoli? I don't even remember. in January. Like Inzaghi rotated heavily. Like he
Udinese.
played Udinese, thank you. We played all the reserves. And I'm hoping we see a similar performance here where he isn't trying to rely on the starters. He starts Arnautovic and Taremi together. He's has De Piero on the bench as youth available. Like there's no need to go all out for this match, especially with Lazio especially with Napoli waiting on the weekends. The formatting of the Coppa Italia is just so dumb. Like the idea of having a random two-legged semi-final makes absolutely no sense. I'm not trying to EPL fanboy here, but like the setup of the FA Cup makes so much more sense than the setup of the Coppa Italia. And we've talked about this in the past of like the big clubs essentially getting buys all the way through to the round of 16. Like this entire competition's a joke, and that's why if we go home without a Coppa Italia, I won't be losing any sleep at night.
I don't know, you know me, I don't like to ever compromise. I don't like to, when it comes to football, I don't like to think upon the lines of we've got Napoli ahead, so therefore we need to put out a weak side, or we need to take that into account when playing against Lazio. I really feel like the best coaches out there, the most successful coaches, have this kind of bullishness to them, just headstrongness, and where they'll push through the adversity by sheer will, right? You don't always get the chance to pick and choose between the other, and I think doing that is a sign of a lack of ambition or lower ambition, because I think you're instantly playing yourself in a mentality of I can only pick one or the other. Whereas, as mentioned, at least the way I see it, the best coaches, the most successful coaches, have that inherent greed where they want to win everything and they want both. So the way we think about things shapes our actions, and that's a kind of long-winded way of saying I don't think we can or should throw the Coppa, but I won't be surprised or upset if we lose. Yeah, what can I say? I would like to see us win this. I would like to see us put out a relatively strong team, but you're right. Rotate wherever possible. Zalewski, maybe Bisek. I guess Bastoni has to play. De Vrij too. Definitely give Acerbi a rest. And I'd start Asllani again if Hakan is not fit.
Yeah.
I definitely think
Zelensky probably starts.
Yeah, or one of Zielinski or Asllani. I still think you need to start with Barella here, and maybe even Mkhitaryan. I don't think you can just go full scale rotation. So
I think that my point is that you can win this match without starting Lautaro, Thuram, and Hakan. You can get away with playing most of the lineup you just explained, and that's still good enough to beat Lazio. This is not a good Lazio side. This is a Lazio side that's also going to rotate because, let's be honest, Lazio is more concerned about trying to lock down the top 4 spot than they are the Coppa Italia. I'm not expecting their full strength side. So you should be able to get away with it. And I do think like part of the problem with this competition is the culture of the competition, where you would expect the smaller sides to take this seriously as like, hey, this is their chance to win a trophy this year. This is a sort of their free hit at the big clubs. But you saw it when we played Udinese earlier this year, and they basically fully rotated their entire team because they were more concerned about resting and getting ready for the next Serie A match than they were about actually taking a shot at beating us. It's just the culture of this competition is one of complacency. And it's like, if you manage to luck your way to the semifinal, then you take things seriously. But until that point, don't worry about it. And you saw that with Napoli when they crashed out earlier this season.
Yeah,
with
perfect.
Largely a reserve side.
Perfect analogy.
So it's not a match obviously I'm not saying throw the match. Obviously you try and win it, but I think you take some creative liberties knowing that if you're peeking around the corner, you have Napoli, you have Feyenoord as your next 2 matches, much more relevant to our goals this season. And as a result, like I said, I would start on Altovich and Taremi up top, give Lautaro the break, and if you need a goal late, you can throw Lautaro on, but if not, run Taremi into the ground and see if he can finally get a goal for us.
Agreed. Shall we touch upon on Napoli?
I think we've got to. This is it, right? I mean, this is the last stand. So as we've been recording, Napoli go out and drop more points. It is incredible how this team keeps dropping points, and I give you credit, Jay, because you've been saying they're cooked. You've been saying they're not going to recover from their winter transfer window. And look, when Conte is a manager, I'm always going to give you the benefit of the doubts because the guy is a mentality monster. He is someone who whips you into shape, and he demands your best. So as a result, I just kept, much like I kept waiting for Inter to put up a good performance in our derbies against Milan and Juve. I keep waiting for this Napoli team to wake up, start picking up points again. But instead, we're 4 in a row. They've dropped points in the league. This is their first loss in that sequence, losing to Como, and now we are officially top of table. No games in hand to take into consideration. None of that. It is just we've both played the same amount of matches. We are top of table, and now we have a direct head-to-head clash against Napoli. And can't really explain with words how much a win here would do for our Scudetto odds, pushing us clear of Napoli, giving us a definitive tiebreaker over Napoli in the league since it's based on head-to-head. Like, this is everything you're playing for. And as I look around at our team's sort of lackadaisical approach to the season, the lack of mentality, the complacency, you have to hope that this is the match where these guys can get together and say, we need to man up. We need to go ahead and put our best foot forward, because this is the most important match of the season. This is what it's all going to boil down to. And it's interesting to me how the dynamic of Napoli's performance today changes things, because honestly, if Napoli had won today against Como and they were still top of the table, just knowing the way Conte works from a psychology standpoint, I think he would have been pretty content with a draw. Just hold serve, keep Napoli ahead, and think to himself that over the course of these last 11 matches, I will be able to outgrind Inter while I'm focused on the league and they're focused on the Champions League. But the calculus of that changes now, where Napoli are now find themselves staring up at us. And I think it puts a little bit more of a burden and onus onto Napoli to try and take advantage of this. They're at home. They are going to be well rested. And yeah, I think this creates an onus on Napoli to try and go and win this match. In terms of
they have to win it. Otherwise, even if they win all other games aside from this match, they still might lose the title. So it's their one chance to, unless you want to like hedge that the people in front of you will fuck up, which is always just
which we probably will. We're probably not going to win our next 11 matches after this Napoli game.
True, but from a title competitor standpoint, it's never the most reassuring strategy to drive in second place behind the leader and just wait for them to fuck up. You know what I mean? Even if it is statistically likely, like, you're going to encounter the same problems yourself, right? So look, I think it'll be a cautious game, but I think it's going to be an extremely mentally draining game for the guys. I think it'll be slow, turgid, lots of fouls, lots of cards potentially. I don't think one or the other team is going to blow the other out of the water. I think neither team wants to lose, but because I think both teams will consider a loss here to be extremely damaging. Neither team has been particularly convincing in recent weeks either, so I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes, but what are you expecting to see in terms of like the flow of the game?
So after the January Mercato, Conte sort of changed his tactics a little bit. He went back to his 3-5-2. He'd been playing a 3-4-3 up until that point, and the 3-4-3 just looked, I mean, he had higher quality players, obviously, but it looked better. It was more fluid in attack. The 3-5-2 he's playing with now is a lot more what you'd expect from a Conte side, just in terms of they're keeping a lower block. They don't have many answers in attack right now. Like, I know they were having a problem where they're conceding goals late, but I don't know who they can go through to generate reliable attacking chances, especially now that Lukaku is just not himself anymore. And I really think this is a big storyline to watch heading to this match, which is Lukaku has played against us 3 times since the whole saga unfolded at the end of his second Inter stint. and he has been a complete ghost in all three of those matches. No goals, no assists in three matches, two for Roma, one for Napoli. And we all know Lukaku's known struggles with the mental aspect of the game. He's someone who quickly loses confidence. He needs to be in the form of his life to be playing well. He's not someone who can quickly bounce back from negative things happening to him over the course of the match. And you have to think the pressure of playing Inter, when he knows the history, when he knows how that relationship ended, it strains on him over the course of a match. He ends up in his head, and he does what he sometimes is prone to doing, which is linking into the shadows. He doesn't get himself involved in the game. He's not distributing through link-up play. He's not even creating dangerous goal-scoring chances. And I think that's just a really key thing to watch heading into this game, because if Lukaku is not creating goal-scoring chances in that front two with Raspadori, I don't know how Napoli scores a goal in this match, aside from some sort of self-induced error. We have a Cherby to mark Lukaku. He's looked good against him in previous matchups. And that's really where I think we have the biggest advantage in this game. I'm not convinced we're going to have a great time breaking down Napoli's defense, especially the way our attack and midfield has played in recent matches. But I think it's going to be very hard for Napoli to score a goal against us in this matchup. And that if we can keep them, off the score sheet and get out of here with a draw or a 1-0 win, I'd be thrilled.
Not only is this a massive game for the title, comes as like a bit of a last chance saloon in my eyes, because we've spoken about this extensively, but our record in the big games this season has been atrocious, right? This is the last chance we have to actually beat a big team in Serie A. I mean, we don't have any more derbies against Milan or Juve left. I think we have to play Roma, but let's be real, Roma are kind of shit. So you've got Napoli. That's your only chance to kind of really to show the pretenders for your throne who the boss is, who the champion is. It's very funny how the season kind of makes you forget that we're the champions. You know what I mean? Because I don't feel like we play like it. I don't feel like there's any of that fighting tooth and nail to keep your hold on the championship, that you'd expect from a championship winning side. So it's been a bit deceiving, but this is our last chance to really kind of to make a statement and say, look, we are the champions. We're going to fight to the death over this. But I agree with your kind of tactical point in that I don't see that Napoli are going to have a ton of success via Lukaku. I mean, the most he can do is just lay a ball off for someone like Raspadori or Politano to take a strike at. Other than that, all the danger is going to be from Politano and maybe some spills where you got quick players like Raspadori, and McTominay is very good at these second balls and scrappy chances and stuff like this. So just got to be careful for those half chances, not being complacent when the play reaches a bit of a standstill. I feel like we have a tendency where if a ball is played forward and the obvious pass is kind of blocked by one of our defenders, everyone has a tendency to go, okay, danger averted. I feel like that kind of leads to moments where scrappy chances can be created from out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, it just boils down to this is the kind of complacency we've played with all year, all season. It's just we've been conceding goals late. It's not like we're giving up well-taken goals. I think for the most part, it's been sloppiness at the back that has been our downfall. And you just have to hope that in the most critical match of the season, this is the one that finally gets Mkhitaryan and the guys out of that first gear. This gets them to turn up the intensity and play like champions for once this season.
The one thing I really want to avoid this game is the team kind of like shooting their load and then just crapping out after that. It looked to be the case against Genoa, and it's been the case against so many other opponents this season, especially Juventus in the second game was such a good example of it. We have the ball, we make some chances, things look good, we apply a little bit of pressure, but we don't have the ruthlessness or seriousness to kind of put them away, and it seems like we want to score or want to get a result with the minimum amount of effort possible, but this isn't corporate where you want to make a revenue with as little expenditure as possible, effort is not a resource that you should think of in such a manner. Effort is not optional, even if you have to apply more of it than you want to beat a small team. Sometimes it's just the way it is. But I think for us this season, it's been like we only want to apply a certain amount of effort, and then after we apply that effort, it's like that's our effort for the game done, and then we're very, very incapable of showing much effort after that initial effort is already depleted, right? And I feel like Juventus was a perfect example. We were better in this first half, created more chances, should have scored, but obviously we didn't. And then after that, it just felt like, yeah, we've done our part. We've used up all our effort, and now we've got nothing more to give. And the result was predictable after that. And like I said yesterday, Genoa was looking kind of like that as well. So that's the one thing I really want to avoid from this Napoli game. I want us to kind of pace ourselves, stay smart, stay within the contest at all times, not deplete ourselves, not gas ourselves by just throwing too many punches too early. Most importantly, have the mental capacity to stay in this late, because this might come down to late chances or to last minute drama or whatever, So I just want to see us have a bit more of that kind of championship pedigree where you're in it for the full 90 minutes. You have the effort to apply yourself for the full 90 minutes and the mentality to take an opportunity whenever it may fall in those 90 minutes.
So what's your prediction for this one?
I don't know. Despite all that, I don't actually have a prediction. I feel like us losing at this point is probably the least likely outcome. I mean, there's only 3 possible outcomes, right? But I feel like a Napoli win is probably unless you want to throw cancellation in there as a wild card. But yeah, look, I really think that a Napoli win is the lowest possible outcome. But maybe that's like a 35% Inter win, 35% draw, and then like a 30% Napoli win or something. You get the point I'm trying to make. I think the chances of Napoli winning are lower than the chances of us winning or of it being a draw, but not by a significant margin. Have I cursed myself by trying to make up for the lack of the optimists here today by saying I think we will finally beat a big opponent this season in a big game this season, and I think we will beat Napoli 1-0. I'll give the goal to, I was going to say Keita Balde. For some reason I was thinking about the Wonder Saga. That's a hell of a saga if you've been following.
The question everyone wants to know, Jay, is Wanda Nera, would you?
I mean, I'm not really a guy with morals, so yes. Wait, was the question era specific? So is this like Wanda now or like into Wanda?
Let's go right now. She walks up to you at a bar.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I asked the question, because the answer is yes to both.
Exactly. That's the only correct answer. Anyone who says otherwise is lying.
That's right. It's not often you get the chances of being an apprentice to a legend. I'll give us a 1-0 win, and I'll give the goal to Pavard. Finally going to come good. Finally going to score his first goal for us, and it's going to be the most clutch goal at the most clutch time. So 1-0 Pavard in like the 75th minute, and we'll take the Scudetto initiative. Speaking of the Scudetto race, I'm telling you, man, fucking Juve are going to end up in like second place or something. They have this disgusting way of being shit for the entire season, but somehow snaking their way to like the upper positions just due to like everyone else's incompetence. And I think that's the way it's going to go again this time. So despite them seemingly competing for like 4th place for 70% of the season, I think they're going to be easily top 3 by the end of it.
I would like to see Fiorentina make a surge here and get into a Champions League spot. I think on the balance of play, they deserve one more than Lazio. So I'd like to see them make a little surge at the table. On Juve, it sure feels like you're going to be right. But the thing is, Atalanta are playing well. It would take a straight up collapse from Napoli to open up Juve finishing higher in the table. So I'm not ruling it out, but it really feels like a 3-team race for 4th place right now. For this match, I'm going to be optimistic for some reason and go 2-0 Inter. This is one of those, there is absolutely no evidence that this team is capable of winning a match like this. We have squandered every opportunity this season to take points off our largest rivals. We have done it in every way possible, blowing leads, missing penalties. We've done it all. And yet somehow I still have faith that this team is going to wake up when it matters most and win a critical match. It just boils down to we are the better side. We have the more talented players. And I'm hoping they can switch on. I'm hoping they go ahead and just, once again, prove that champions medal. When you look at the guys in this squad, these are all Scudetto winners. They know what it takes here. They need to go and do the job. So give me a 2-0. Whenever we win a critical game like this, you get a goal from someone you wouldn't expect it from. I suppose you predicting a goal from Pavard is of the same vein. But I want a Darmian goal. He's going to give us a substitute appearance goal. But we'll already be up 1-0 at that point, courtesy of a Lautaro goal. So give me 2-0, Lautaro and Darmian to ice the cake. And we're going to pull ourselves 4 points clear at the top of the table. Is there a Jay's hot betting tip before we conclude?
Next week, Real Madrid are playing away to Real Betis. The man of the hour, Anthony, is going to continue his form and down Real Madrid with a 2-1 victory where he will score one and assist the other.
Look, another interesting attacking player who is available in the January transfer window.
Yeah, having said that, we would have rioted if they'd linked us to Anthony.
Hey man, anything that would require me not having to watch Taremi on the pitch ever again.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're supposed to be trying something new this week. We're supposed to have a mini episode where we don't talk for an hour and 20 minutes, but instead we do a 20-minute recap of Inter-Lazio. We'll see if that ends up happening or not. Stay tuned. Until then, we'll be back next week to definitively recap the Napoli game. So we'll catch you all then. I guess, Jay, take us away.
Mac, I can't say it. Feels like I'm just walked into a church and holy water's being sprayed on me and my skin's melting away. And I can't bring myself to say it. Forza Inter.
And Forza Torino. We'll catch you next week.
That's right.